Joining us now, it's a Matich Monday. Trevor Matich of ESPN College Football Insider, BYU National Champion. Trevor, today our Twitter question is, what is the biggest positive from BYU's 27-7 win at Middle Tennessee? We've gone through a laundry list of reasons that we feel like BYU should feel positive, but for you, what's the biggest positive?
That BYU can win football games when they're playing the opposite team and they're not playing themselves as well. And that's what this was. The defense was in the right place doing the right things. We've been talking for a month about stand in the right place, look at the right guy, and then finish the play with the right technique. And then if he's better than you, he's better than you. But at least make him beat you. And in this game, that's exactly what BYU's defense did. It's been a long time since they've had this consistent a performance.
And it felt good. I realize it's Middle Tennessee. I think we all realize that. But that's a win that BYU had to have, right, Trevor?
Well, yeah, for a lot of reasons. And you're right. I mean, Middle Tennessee is not Alabama. But they had not lost at home yet this year. And BYU's defense held them to their lowest point output by far of the season. I mean, they beat this team worse than anybody else did. So if you want to find some solace in that, that's fine. Either way, to me, the win is just validation. The win is validation of what they did in practice and how they focused and how they got it onto the field. And so, to me, that's what it represents. It's a tangible manifestation of the adjustments that they made in the way they prepared and the way they played. And you need that kind of justification, especially after going an entire month without any justification of any kind beyond what's profoundly negative in the world of football, and that is 4 consecutive losses.
ESPN college football analyst Trevor Matich on BYU Sports Nation for another Matich Monday. Trevor, I would have been just fine with a 20-point BYU win on the road, east of the Mississippi, this late in the season, with Taysom Hill as the starting quarterback. So for them to do it with Christian Stewart and to finish the game without 4 of their 5 best players, that's saying something, isn't it?
Yeah, that is. And there's another subplot underneath that as you look at the offensive line. They started in this game, or listed as starters, 3 freshmen, a sophomore, and 1 senior. And so you've got a lot of young guys playing and a lot of young guys that are contributing. For example, you had a linebacker get 3 sacks, a guy who's listed as third on the depth chart coming in, Teu Kautai, and they schemed for him. And he came through. They ran blitzes and stunts specifically to get him free. And he not only pulled the trigger, he finished the play. And so a lot of these guys that either are very, very young or guys that we aren't used to hearing their name called rose up when they got the opportunity. And that's part of what Bronco Mendenhall has established as a culture there, where if you are performing at the highest level in practice, you'll play. And if you perform at the highest level and produce when you play, you'll keep playing. And what that does is get the very, very best out of everybody on that roster, and I think we saw an example of it working at its best against Middle Tennessee.
And there's something to what else we saw, which wasn't necessarily on the field, almost on the sideline, which was passion and intensity. We saw BYU excited to be there. It helps when you have a lead, but it was 7-7, and BYU pitched a shutout in the second half. BYU needs that kind of emotion in the last 3 games.
Yeah, they do need that emotion, and it's hard to maintain that emotion when you're losing. And it's got to come from team leaders, but a lot of those team leaders are hurt and not able to practice. And you just can't do the same thing from crutches as you can when you're on the field with a helmet on. And so a lot of this came from the coaching staff, where, Bronco, everybody thinks that don't know him, people that don't know him, you have the impression that he's kind of a bookish librarian. He might be a good bishop, and he would be, of course. And
I think he's a high counselor right now.
Well, see, there you go. But they don't see the fire. When you walk up and look Bronco in the eye in a game day situation, you see that fire burning. I mean, you see the stripling warriors, about ready to go out and lay waste to the enemy once again. And that's the kind of fire that burns in Bronco. And he unleashed that during the week, and I think the players picked up on it and carried it into game day.
Trevor Matich with us on BYU Sports Nation. Christian Stewart has done a commendable job as the backup quarterback in his 4 starts, 12 total touchdowns, a couple of interceptions, has lost a couple of fumbles as well. How would you sum up what Christian has done in the post-Taysom era in 2014?
He's been marginally heroic. I don't want to overstate it, but I don't want to understate it either. He has played magnificently given the number of reps in practice that he's had and given what he's had to deal with. I think now we realize how good Taysom really is because we don't see Taysom throw on rhythm a lot because the offensive line still isn't in a position to give him a lot of time in the pocket to be able to throw on rhythm. So Taysom has to create, and that creativity is one thing that's led to so many of his big Sports Center highlights. Well, Christian Stewart in this game had to scramble, and a lot of his best plays came on the run as well when he was under pressure, and he had to create. He doesn't have the physical tools that Taysom has to be able to do that, and yet he still made plays anyway, especially in the second half. And so I'm incredibly proud of the way Christian Stewart was able to do what he had to do, even though it's outside his wheelhouse of a pocket passer, to be able to make plays and do what the team needed him to do at the time.
Yeah, he's rushing for touchdowns. He threw for 300, 2 touchdowns, no picks. I mean, that was a good game. One thing that stuck out too, Trevor, was an 81-yard punt by Scott Arellano, the longest in BYU history. If I'm not mistaken, you were in the game where Lee Johnson set the record with an 80-yard punt previously. What's it like when a guy punts for 80 yards?
Well, you don't notice it's a punter. It's like you say, oh, did he punt a long one? Oh, very nice.
That's
Sit
his
down.
job.
Did anybody hit you? Nobody hits you? Then why am I supposed to be impressed? Sit down. Okay, I'm kidding. I'm talking trash. Listen, he's one of the great weapons in the nation. I mean, one of the best punters in the country and a great weapon for BYU. And I'll tell you this, that he had a little bit of help there because he had the wind at his back. But when Lee Johnson unleashed his 80-yarder, it was at Wyoming, and people talk about kicking at the Mile High Stadium in Denver, where it's a mile up there. The Colorado Rockies hit more home runs because the air is thinner, balls carry farther. Well, Lee did it at Wyoming. It was 1.5 miles in the air. And so that's not to take away anything, but to say that sometimes, the right place and the right time helps. And Lee took advantage of that to uncork an 80-yarder, and then we got an 81-yarder here with the wind blowing from behind, which, is kind of awesome. And so I think it's good when a punter who rarely gets enough credit, nationally certainly, does something that everybody points to, because now we have the opportunity to say not just that he set that record, but that he also is one of the best punters in the nation at dropping the ball inside the 20. Now all those little things that normally don't eclipse sacks and touchdowns and all the fun stuff to talk about, those things can come out, and I think that's important.
Do you have a conversation with him when he comes off the field, or is it just like, whatever, man?
What, the punter?
Yeah. When Lee Johnson did that.
I can't remember, probably because, I didn't care. I'm kidding. No. Listen, I love Lee. Lee is one of the great, not just one of the great punters, one of the great guys. And in the NFL, he carried that on. I mean, you would see a ball go up in the air if you're just casually watching, games, and all of a sudden you'd see a ball just take off like it was shot out of a rocket. And that's usually Lee Johnson. So I don't remember if I said anything, but I will say this, that in the NFL, one of the many things I did was long snapping. So I spent a lot of time with kickers and punters. So all the grief that I give to kickers and punters, I was over there with them. I was one of those guys. So I'm just playing and just having fun. And I'm glad that Lee was on the field to be able to see that happen.
He dominated Wyoming. He broke their scoreboard, had an 80-yard punt against them. The Cowboys were happy when Lee Johnson graduated from BYU.
Wait a minute, he broke their scoreboard?
Yeah.
He told us the story about that. Like, was it pregame or halftime or something? He booted a ball into the scoreboard and, broke some lights or something.
I'll tell you this about Lee, though. On our team, we had a pretty good team. We had a pretty good run of games, and then we had a pretty good run in the national championship year as well. And normally the kickers and the punters are off to the side trying not to be noticed by messing something up. Lee was always in the middle of every scrum, and he was every bit as much of that team on and off the field as any defensive lineman, linebacker, fullback, quarterback. Lee was one of those punters that, he was a defensive end in a punter's body.
I don't even know what to think of that phrase.
Trevor, I understand that the national guys that have followed BYU closely this year know what kind of injury problems they've had. Now the Cougars are 5-4. They finally ended the 4-game losing streak. Can they still earn back some credibility this year to the people that matter, the voters, the people that are paying attention, and help themselves leading into next year?
Unfortunately, the nature of the game right now is that, nationally people want to see who's at the top. And all the conversation in the national media has been heavily in what does any win or loss or injury have to do with the potential 4 teams that will make the playoff. And if you're out of that conversation, you're way out of that conversation. Look at Oklahoma. Oklahoma had 1 loss to TCU. They're still in the conversation to be in the top 4. Then they lost at home to Kansas State by 1 point because their kicker, a kid named Honeycutt, who's one of the greatest kickers in the history of that program, missed a chip shot field goal. And because of that, they lost by 1 point, and because of that, nobody talks about him anymore. And so BYU, in losing 4 straight, played themselves right out of the national conversation. And, when you look at what remains for them, they don't have anything left on the schedule, and this would include the bowl game if they get there, with UNLV, Savannah State, and at Cal to get the attention that I think they might want. And at Cal, by the way, that would be a quality win if BYU can pull that off.
Yeah.
But right now, next year is going to have to be its own thing because they will not carry any momentum through.
So even if BYU runs the table, and then next year Taysom Hill, Jamal Williams, if they're healthy, does running the table and getting to 9 wins and ending on a 5-game win streak matter at all going into next year for preseason voting?
Nothing? No, it won't matter at all. They're off the radar right now from that standpoint. But here's what does matter. Taysom Hill coming back, and if he's able to come back healthy, then people will look at the schedule and say, okay, they lost 4 games, the first 4 games without Taysom Hill on the field. And they'll say, now Taysom Hill is back. What can he do? Right? And that will create a talking point that'll get people focused on BYU. They won't carry any benefit of doubt, but they will carry eyeballs seeing what they're doing because there will be curiosity if Taysom can get them right back to where they were before. So that's kind of what the hope is. But right now, the hope is and the goal is get bowl eligible, man. They got UNLV coming up. Win that game, they're bowl eligible, and that's where it is right now. It's very much a local focus right now because the national focus is all on who will be in the top 4, and it's like nobody else exists but those 4 teams right now, which is kind of weird. It's not the way it's ever been.
Yeah.
Let's talk about those 4 teams that are relevant nationally, and the first college football playoff rankings were released. What's your take on how that's happened, and do you have any problems with the way that the voting came out for the first week, and just give us your overall take on what's going on?
Yeah, I'm chapped. Quite very chapped about the way the first rankings were. The second rankings will come out tomorrow night, right? But the first rankings, which don't reflect last week's games, but they were the first ones that came out last Tuesday, they bothered me, and I'll tell you why. Teams will shift up and down over the course of the season, the rest of the season. But what I think we had revealed was the criteria that they would use, how important certain criteria were. And head-to-head wasn't as important to them as it is to me.
Clearly.
Let me tell you this. Let me give you guys a little quiz here. 2 teams, anonymous teams, same conference, same record. They played head-to-head. The team that won the head-to-head is ranked 6 spots below the team that lost head-to-head. Everything else in terms of conference and record is the same. Would that annoy you?
Yes, absolutely.
TCU Baylor, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, TCU Baylor. TCU ranked 7th, Baylor at 13, both with the same record. The difference is TCU lost at Baylor. Now, it was a tight game. They lost by 3 points. It was a shootout. And TCU fans might complain that their head-to-head was at Baylor, which is not fair. But if it makes them feel better, they can cry it out because next year they get home field advantage. But the fact that the selection committee took everything else being relatively equal and said head-to-head is only another of many things that we look at, I got to wonder what in the world they're thinking about because everything else that they look at is designed to separate teams that did not play head-to-head. Now, for people that say that head-to-head is the only thing, it's not.
Overall record is the number one thing.
Well, because, Georgia lost to South Carolina. And South Carolina has 4 or 5 losses now.
Right.
And so South Carolina you wouldn't put above Georgia. Arizona just picked up their second loss. And so Oregon with one loss, even though Arizona beat Oregon, now, it's okay to put Oregon above them because they don't have the same record anymore.
Overall record is number one.
Yeah. But anyway, so I'm interested to see if tomorrow night the selection committee fixes that and makes head-to-head with all else being relatively equal to give that more importance, because I've been lambasting them all week. Let's see if they've been paying attention to me or if they just don't care.
I noticed.
I would like to have
thanks.
I would like to have some more lambasting from you, Trevor, if I can ask for that.
Lambasting actually sounds like something delicious to do to brisket, doesn't it?
I put a little land-basting on that.
Yum.
Hey, Trevor, you were at the Grove at Ole Miss last weekend. Where are you headed this Saturday?
We are going to Baton Rouge for Alabama at LSU.
Woo!
And I'll tell you, for old school people that are a bit annoyed that we've got basketball on grass and teams running 90 plays a game, this will be an old-fashioned, vicious, violent slugfest where mouthpieces are knocked out of people's heads at the line of scrimmage every single play. This is old school. This will be fun.
If somebody takes your shrimp gumbo, I will personally come down to Baton Rouge and lambaste some folks.
Yeah, would you please? They brought up from tailgating at the Grove. We were right across from the sidewalk from the Grove. Somebody brought up from their tailgate fresh homemade seafood gumbo in bowls, right? And they put them behind our set, and I'm thinking, oh, yum. When this segment's over in commercial, I'm going to dive into that. Well, when the segment ended, I turned around, and they ate my gumbo.
Someone ate
my gumbo. Look, man, you kick a man's dog, that's a bad thing, but you eat his seafood gumbo made fresh at a tailgate at the Grove, that's just mean, man. That's just mean.
# save Trevor's gumbo. Trevor, great to talk to you.
All right, guys.